this. I'm gonna start with that, let me just kick things off. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you three. Maybe Mr. Waleed, you can start. Just share a little bit more about your background, how you've been involved with the Saudi ecosystem really over the past decade, and then we'll go around and hear from everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Hani. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. You know, I'm glad to be in presence with both May and Salman, great builders that I have a lot of respect for. In terms of background, I've been in the VC space here in Saudi since I would say late 2015. At the time, VC investments in all of Saudi was around $14 million, according to ArabNet. The following year I got in, it went down to $5 million. So that's how I started in the ecosystem. Before that, you know, I used to do, you know, I managed mega programs for the e-government initiatives that were delivered by a startup called Elm. Now it's a listed company, one of the biggest e-gov companies in the region. Before that, I used to do hardcore engineering. So I used to do semiconductor, and you know, I worked in the semiconductor space in the US between 2000 and 2008. I spent a couple and a half years with Microsoft as well, doing their Windows CE and Windows Mobile programs before iOS and Android came out, and you know, basically took over what Microsoft was trying to do in that space. So my background in terms of academics is in computer science. I have a bachelor's and master's in computer science. Now I'm a GP at Sukna Ventures. We focus on early stage investments for tech companies around the world, actually, but those that are focused on MENA markets. So if MENA is geo-focused for those startups, then and their tech startups in their early stages, then it's part of our mandate that we can invest in.
Amazing, thank you, Waleed. May, do you want to go next and just share a little bit more about your startup background?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity and being with amazing people like Mr. Waleed and of course Mr. Salman. I entered into the entrepreneurship ecosystem after Mr. Waleed Alballaa 2016, but as a freelance with the entrepreneur themselves in Jeddah. Back then, there was a small and medium business, growing small business in Jeddah, especially. And I was involving in advising, freelancing with them in business development, developing financial modeling for them to get, the grant from Munshaat or other banks that is having partnership with that. So I was helping a lot in the research, talking to users, to them. I was involved. This encouraged me to start thinking about a side hustle while I was in a corporate, international corporation called Deutsche Bank, and FedEx after that. So I was working on Joy Out as a side hustle to test my ability to do something, startup tech, and try to, test the MVP, going to user, test all these kind of things, and going to market and talking to investors. This was my first test in the entrepreneurship, and it was a big learning for me. I learned a lot from it. Then, because of Joy Out, I get to know my current co-founders as well, Mohammed Bilian and Moya. Then we co-founded NQOODLET. It's a fintech, and we moved to Riyadh because, Riyadh city became the hot, city for entrepreneurship in Saudi Arabia. We see the problem ourselves before. That's why we found this company. Before that, I was working in corporate more than 8 years in B2B business, special business development, marketing and sales, customer success. I joined Deutsche Bank, then I joined TNT, then FedEx. So it's a multinational kind of thing. Then I jumped, I was very satisfied to join the entrepreneurship ecosystem because you give you more, 10x learning than what I was having with corporate, at least at that time. Yeah.
Great, thank you, May.
Yeah, thank you so much.
we'll also talk about you know, that move. We were talking a little bit in the room before about Riyadh and Jeddah and the comparison between those two hubs. But before we get to that, Salman, I'll turn it over to you. You've also been involved in both SMEs and more tech-focused startups for a long time in Saudi Arabia. So share a bit more about your background with the audience.
Yes, thank you, Annie, for having me. A pleasure to be here, especially with such esteemed panelists. So my name is Salman. I have over a decade of experience in supply chain digital transformation in the corporate world. I worked in some of the most complex, heavy engineering operations in the kingdom. And then through running my own restaurant as a side hustle, I discovered a big gap in the supply chain. I knew there's a better way to do it. So with that in mind, I launched and secured funding for a venture studio. The idea was to test out numerous ventures and keep funding the winners. So we tested out 10 ideas, launched 6 proof of concepts, 3 MVPs, and eventually NOMU was born. At the moment, I'm scaling NOMU. It's an AI-powered supply chain as a service in finance. Yeah, that's a bit about me.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you, all three of you, so much for joining and your willingness to share your experiences and expertise. Waleed, I want to kind of touch on something that you mentioned, you know, the numbers of venture funding in Saudi when you first started compared to today. Could you kind of give us a walkthrough of those past 10 years, some milestones, what's changed from, I think you mentioned like maybe 12, 15 million in 2015 to obviously the record year and the record performance of last year. So yeah, if you could just give like an overarching history of the startup and early stage venture scene in Saudi for the past 10 years, that would be great.
Sure. I think, you know, Saudi went through a phenomena that a lot of resource-rich countries went through, and that impacted the history and shaped the history of entrepreneurship. Now, as you all probably heard of the resource curse or the Dutch disease, Saudi Arabia, you know, in terms of the populace, the people in Saudi, like a lot of other Arabs, you know, entrepreneurship was something that is steeped in history, right? From the days of, you know, رحلة الشتاء والصيف, you know, that's mentioned in the Quran, going up north and south for commerce, to, you know, the Mecca and Medina, the exposure they got to the rest of the world. But when oil was discovered, for a brief few decades, the blessings of oil also hid or created some kind of, you know, environment where entrepreneurship didn't become a good option for most people. You could get a very comfortable job, a safety net, more prestigious positioning socially through getting a government job or a multinational or a big company or corporate. And that continued, I would say, between the 1960s up to probably 2000. Where even the policymakers, not just the people and social attitudes, but even the government policymakers didn't see much value in enabling innovation, because with innovation, as you probably know, it comes a lot of messiness, right? You're experimenting, you're trying different things, you're breaking things sometimes. And for the policymakers, they didn't see, at the time at least, you know, what's the value of allowing this if the government is already having all the resources that they need. But then I guess, you know, with some success stories like Al-Musafir and Kareem later on, this opened the eyes of both talent and policymakers, as well as investors, that the opportunity is actually there. And given the depth of the market, it's you know, according to IMF, 2022, the GDP was about $1 trillion, which is 1/3 of the UK's GDP. It's a big market, and the talent is there, the capital is definitely there. So the question became, what's missing? What's the missing ingredient that we need in order to, instead of being consumers, also become producers and build things and export things? And this process took some time, but I think It started out with the basic tech companies like Elm, like Sadad and others who were doing system integration level technology. And they proved out that at least tech companies can compete with Accenture, with Wipro, with IBM, and build, sensitive mission critical solutions for national needs. Out of that came the comfort of, let's then try doing, products. Let's try doing other things. And in fact, my first, entry into the VC was out of the need for Ilm to grow inorganically. So we created the corporate VC in 2015. And yes, that was a bad year for VC. VC almost went extinct the next year. But if you looked at the inputs at the time, lots of talent was going into the ecosystem. Lots of building was happening. And deregulation, which is also very important, was also starting to come into play. So we started seeing reforms in the market that encouraged the creation of new types of companies. So I guess in terms of history and background, this is the context where this recent momentum happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I want to come back to some of those success stories in a second, but interested in May and Salman, your experiences, particularly from a cultural aspect, telling your families, for example, that you're going to be a tech founder or something like that. Is that kind of a accepted and encouraged path these days culturally? Is there still some potential resistance to that? How's it been? How is being a tech entrepreneur viewed culturally in the kingdom?
Salman,
You can go, May. I can go after.
actually, I think, of course, because some of our families, get used to the thing that the best and stable pathways for the career is to go for government sectors and these things. Some people have this mindset and believe in it, that this is don't do taking risks. Some people don't have this high risk appetite of the family, and it divided, by the way. Some of them notice that a change, the direction need to change, especially when they get retired and see the difference. Some resisting come also from your colleague at work, not only the family. So I think there is a diverse perspective. I think the good news that maybe my mom is supporting that anyway. She said, whenever you go, I'm supporting, but maybe she don't know the nitty-gritty of the thing, but she see that you are always busy. Some of the family said this is, they are not with this path, but they said, let it go and experiment, but at the end of the day, you will see whatever best for you. I think now the new generation like us have different perspective. The mid-generation see that there is a change after they retired. Also, they see that no, even government, alhamdulillah, with the Saudi vision now is going to privatization. So they are witnessing the change of that. So there is a big need to get to your own business and take the risk and fail and move, but still there is a resistance. I think Salman also share some common things, I think, as well. You can go ahead.
Sure.
Salman.
Yeah, from what I see, most young people are still eager to get good work experience in more well-established blue chip companies, or at least very well-funded startups. There's a bit of a decline in taking risk appetite at early stage. I think one of the things is there's still a very big culture of settling down early and having a family. Granted, it's getting a bit later than what it is, but the mindset on going into entrepreneurship is changing. I don't see there's like a taboo in it. It is encouraged, but I think it's the shift is more get your work experience, understand it well, and then take the risk, right? This is how I see the shift here, especially when I'm hiring talent when I was in such an early stage, right? It was more difficult than with more established companies. So
just to add,
If I can add,
sorry Mr. Waleed, بالله بعدك.
no, after you.
لا, I can see some people take it as a trend, and I'm not sure this is the right way. It's not for everyone. If it has become like a phenomena, like a trend without a real core value, this is also not good. But sometimes people said you need to have a lot of failure and a lot of trend, then the market become developed maybe. I'm not sure, but I'm just saying you need to evaluate, as Mr. Salman said, evaluated, well equipped, and يعني calculated at least. This is it, Mr. Waleed.
Thank you so much. Actually, to support your point, I was going to suggest to the attendees, if they're interested, there is actually an organization that tracks entrepreneurial attitudes across different ecosystems, and it covers Saudi as well. It's the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and they have a recent report from 2022, and you can see what May is talking about. There was a fad sometime like 3 or 4 years ago, where a lot of people went to entrepreneurship for the wrong reasons. And now we see a change in the type of founders who come in. They're more of veterans like May and Salman, who understand the market, who have been, through tough challenges, and know how to approach this in a much better way. And if you look at Jim's report for 2022, you can see actually the surveys that they've done. And let me just quickly read for you some of the stats. So in terms of percentage of people who were in the survey who said entrepreneurship was a good career choice, in 2022 it was about 95% of people surveyed, whereas in 2016 it was around 80%. In terms of high status, people, if you reviewed as high status, it's around 97% in 2022. But again, if you look at the fear of failure, it actually increased with time. So it tells you that people are getting more realistic, more serious about how to deal with startups, and that is not just for show. No, these are real businesses. There's lots of heavy lifting, and there's big risk in getting them. So I highly recommend this report if you're interested in understanding the social attitudes in Saudi around entrepreneurship and how that ecosystem stacks against other ecosystems around the world.
Great, thank you so much. I want to move on kind of to a related point, but Waleed, you mentioned some of the success stories that have kind of propelled the ecosystem forward over the past few years. What are some of the characteristics that you've seen that makes founders successful in Saudi? What type of maybe previous career experiences have they had that lend themselves well to establishing a company? Have they been more homegrown, worked inside the kingdom? Have they studied abroad? Talk to me about some of the characteristics that you've seen from these success stories and the successful founders that you've worked with.
So for me, VC is really the business of searching for exceptions. So I would be hesitant to tell you that there's a certain mold that successful founders follow. And I'll give you a few examples. One of the most famous examples in Saudi is a bootstrapped company called Haraj. It's one of the biggest classified businesses in MENA, and it's huge. And Yusuf al-Rashidi didn't even grow up in Riyadh, the capital. He grew up in a rural place and didn't get VC investments. And if you look at Haraj, it follows a similar philosophy of Craigslist, of no thrills, no advanced UI, very simple, and that's probably one of their secrets for success. Another example is Classera. It's a portfolio company that we invested in. They operate today in 40 countries, 40, and their latest market was actually in Pakistan, where they got fund. They got a deal with the Pakistani government and the World Bank. The World Bank actually did the due diligence on them to cover 60 million students. Classera actually started out in San Francisco by one Saudi founder and one Egyptian founder, and they came to Saudi later on, and this is where they found success competing against all the other players internationally and locally. Another one actually is Muzan. Muzan is also a portfolio company of ours, and they're a deep tech company. PhDs, one of them is Dr. Khalid Ghanem, a veteran. He founded Ilm, he founded Takamul. He was the head of the biggest telecom company in the region before. And after that, he decided to work with 3 other co-founders and created Muzan. And Muzan today is expanding into UAE and Iraq. They have an engineering office in London. And the head of the team is an Arab who came, Mohammed Ibrahim, who came from Google DeepMind in the UK and now living here in Riyadh. And they were able to 30x their ARR from 2022 up to now. And now they're getting ready for the Series B. So all these three examples, very different people, very different backgrounds. And this is what I think we need: more density, more diversity, and allowing experiments to happen at scale by different people.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think that is a sign of a maturing ecosystem as well, as when you have people of these different profiles, different characteristics able to find success. I'm kind of interested in the founder perspective. So whereas, VCs are looking for characteristics of founders or companies to invest in, Salman, when you've looked to recruit a team in Saudi, what are kind of the characteristics or the places that you've been able to find really top talent to help you build your companies?
Yeah, great question. So I think traditionally most people in the early days, they would outsource the tech part. I think this is changing. I see great tech talent becoming in-house. But we have what I believe strong talent and adequate availability are in the roles such as marketing, operation, and finance. And then more of the technical sales roles, those tend to be outsourced. Although today, with GPT, this is also changing fast. I've always looked to recruit internally, strong talent locally. There's a lot of great talent coming out of university. And this is where I've been kind of putting the direction of the company to go.
Anything for you to add there, May, in terms of identifying talent to bring on board to NQOODLET or the other startups that you've worked with?
Yeah, sure. I think also extension to Salman idea. Always the tech. Most of the time, let's say the couple of years we face difficulties to find the right tech talent, especially in the junior levels and or for the stack of tech. So we try to hire freelance sometimes, we hire outsource companies, we try to also sometimes brought them here to Saudi Arabia. But in terms of I think there is a growing number of talent locally, Saudis, which is give me optimistic overview. Even for the tech, I can see them. Maybe we can talk later about the roadblocks that we have, maybe because of attracting semi-government and big, well-established, as Salman said, they attract them with the very maybe attractive packages and so on and so far. But we witness as well team members, local Saudis, that they searching to join a startup even in a lower salary than corporate because they want to learn. And this has impressed me, honestly. I want to say that we attract some people from big corporate, and they are willing to have, I'm not advising for that or recommending less packages to learn the experience, because maybe one of their plan to become entrepreneur. And this is the trend that Mr. Waleed also talked about after 2016 with the growing number of funding, and the trend which might be pros and cons for it, but the good thing that there is a waves is coming on, and this is I can see there's a practical side to also build talent for startups specifically, because it might be people from prestigious university, but when they join startup they get shocked because this is not the characteristic of the talent that needed for the startup. The mindset, it's not about only soft skills and well academic background. So we also searching for characteristic to take risk. And the good news, I'm optimistic that Saudi, our country, will become also very powerful ecosystem for entrepreneurs, because these people are joining to build companies later, this was not opportunity for us at that time in my generation. I was, there is small number of startups, so Kareem, Uber, very, 3 or 4, and these people go and founded companies also. Now it's becoming bigger, which is very good. That's mean a lot of opportunities is coming for Saudi startup, working in a Saudi startup as well. Will give them the learning and challenges that they face with the founders hand to hand. Will give good, I think, hopefully good talent, local as well, talent for the Saudi startup, even foreigner startup who want to expand. They need localization, and they need mindset for startups. So this is good also when any startup or big company come in Series B or to grow in the kingdom, to attract these kind of people and make them feel that they are also co-founding team of the country. And this is the mindset of Kareem, if you remember, they did that and they succeed in Kareem now and these things with the Dosari and people like him. So this is in a nutshell, just extension to Mr. Waleed and Salman as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this
To-
idea of
to-
kind
to-
of leading generations of, entrepreneurs. Go ahead, Waleed.
May brought up a really great point, and I think this is another sign of the maturity, ongoing maturity. We're still a nascent ecosystem, but we're progressing. Endeavor is a nonprofit that focuses on scale-ups around the world, and their Saudi presence is led by Latif, and she's an excellent entrepreneur. And they've done a great job in analyzing the growth of the ecosystem through what's happening with serial entrepreneurs. Those people who are ex-Kareem or whatever other company that are experienced, and they leave those startups after their growth stage or after they reach peak growth, and create their own new startups. This phenomenon now is presenting a huge leap forward for the ecosystem, because we're seeing a different type of deal flow as VCs that come from these serial entrepreneurs. And I think that's another reason to be excited about the ecosystem. Another point that May brought up is the openness of the market. This hasn't been really there before, and at least at this level. Today, some people are actually getting Saudi citizenship, not just premium residency. Dr. Abdulwahab from the US, who created Cloudera, for example, he has Saudi citizenship now. I know a couple others, people working for Google Cloud or other startups around the world that were given that. And they also have the premium residency program and the relocation programs that are encouraging talent and investors to come to Saudi and feel the openness that the ecosystem is experiencing.
Yeah, I love that, and it is such a kind of revolution in terms of the cultural and legal frameworks that allow for that over the past few years. We've talked a bit about kind of how the talent and founders are maturing. Maybe Salman, I'll turn to you. Kind of as a founder, do you feel like you're seeing a maturity growth as well in terms of the investors that you're able to raise from over the past 5 to 10 years with your projects?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of maturity from the investors, especially with the way they're working with founders. I think early on, from speaking to other founder friends, investors were kind of imposing some of their strategies in an unhealthy way. Today, there's more of a let the founder breathe, let him experiment. It's okay to fail. How can I support attitude? And I think this shift is really healthy, and it's needed to enrich the startup ecosystem. So this is what I'm seeing. And even with my current investors, it's more about how can I support what's going on today, as opposed to this is what you need to do, or this is what I think is best practices, even in the boardroom level.
Nice. That's great to hear. On the capital side, Waleed, I'm also interested in your take, because there's been so much activity and interest from American or North American LPs in going to Saudi GPs to connect with LPs from Saudi. Is that having any kind of like ripple effect on the local ecosystem, any impact on the ground? Or is it mostly staying like at that level between American GPs and potential LPs in the kingdom?
In terms of deployment, and according to Magnet, they reported that in 2022, 50% of investors participating in VC rounds were actually outside of Saudi, whether regional or from outside. That's one thing that we're experiencing. From the LP side, which is VC firms looking for capital from Saudi investors, whether it's PIF or family offices or what have you, that we're also seeing a major increase there. You can go to the Four Seasons in Riyadh. and you run into one of, you can see Andreessen Horowitz there, you can see others coming to Saudi. Sanabil, the VC arm of PIF, is a major investor in many of these funds based in the US. And they see the value, two-way value between the Saudi LP money and having exposure in the US markets as well. We're seeing also activity eastwards towards Singapore, China, and Korea as well. And that's giving us a different kind of exposure into, outside of the US. So I would say the US and probably East Asia are where we're seeing the most interest coming from in terms of either deploying into Saudi or getting LP money into their ecosystems.
Yeah, very nice. A lot of interesting kind of trends taking place. I want to pull on that last thread a little bit in terms of connections from Saudi to other ecosystems, either in MENA or elsewhere in the world, kind of these quote unquote south to south connections versus the connection to just the West into these emerging ecosystems. Salman, I know, for example, NOMU is is operating across MENA. So kind of just interested in like how you've approached building that that type of geographical coverage from Saudi. What is the connectivity like between you working out of Riyadh and other, I think you, if I remember correctly, there are arms in Morocco, Egypt, really across the region. So just talk to me a bit about where Saudi fits into the broader MENA ecosystem.
Yeah, great question. So I think different countries have different connectivity levels. I would say Egypt, UAE are highly connected with Saudi, and most of the startups who are initiated there want to enter the Saudi market because it's now a very healthy and a growing market. There's absolutely great talent as well in Egypt. And the other countries, I think you mentioned, like Tunisia or Lebanon, it's a bit less connected due to, the tough repatriation laws there with the investments. But in general, yeah, the three countries I mentioned, they're very connected with each other. And you see, given, it's becoming normal to work from home, that you will have teammates that are in UAE or teammates that are in Egypt all together. So we see this across the MENA region. Like personally for us, Egypt is a great place to build our own in-house tech team. We have it as a revenue center and as a cost center. So revenue there covers our costs. We've centralized all of our back office over there. It just made much more sense.
Yeah. And in terms of even geographical differences inside Saudi, I know I didn't want us to leave without talking about the Riyadh Jeddah connection and even other potential tech hubs. Maybe you made the decision to move from Jeddah to Riyadh. Talk us through that decision. What's still happening in Jeddah? What does the ecosystem look like outside of Riyadh in particular?
I think Jeddah will be always and has been always a a merchants hub for a lot of the old legacy history of the business in the kingdom. However, we see the shift, as you said, the tech startup specifically between brackets, the talents, the VCs, the investors. What I mean by talent, the people that work in this ecosystem. Let's say that Kareem headquarters was in Riyadh at that time and these things. So Riyadh was the hub for that. We are in fintech area. So the fintech, you need all the regional bank is there, the headquarters, right? The investors as well. Even our early adopter clients, for instance, let's say the first persona we enter with is the high-tech startups to test with them. So most of them was also in there. So it makes sense to us. We assess the situation. We talk to our investors. That even one of our investors, Mr. Yasser Al-Ghamdi, also advise us that this is one of the best decision that you need to think about it that at that time. And we made the decision because even the user interviews we are doing was with startup in Riyadh. So the shift is, let's be specific, Jeddah has a lot of also startups, but maybe the most of the, I will call it coalition or this thing in Riyadh is, the intensity is in Riyadh at the moment. In term, if you take like Silicon Valley or New York, there is some difference as well in term of the business type of kind of thing, startups and mindset. So we thought that this is for NQOODLET is the best path, at least for this industry. Maybe like my friend, colleague in New Meals and Jeddah still, Mr. Hatem and Risal think they don't need now مثلا to move the headquarters to Riyadh. But of course, necessity, Riyadh is a big market for any kind of businesses, not only startup. Even when I used to work in corporate, always Riyadh have, you know, biggest part of the business in terms of purchasing power and volume. So it makes sense that to test there as a big city. Then you replicate the same in the other cities. In our case, we are self-serve. No, we don't need to be a geographic presence like مثلا Kareem and these kind of marketplaces. So we have a client across the kingdom, from Riyadh, from Tabuk, Medina. We have in Sharqiya. So it's not a barrier for us to do a business even from Riyadh without even you know, a branch. We don't have branches in Jeddah or Tabuk or Hada, but we have clients from there because of the amazing, you know, way of doing digital business through, especially after COVID accelerated, people accept Zoom calls a lot. And yeah, so this is let me tell you, this is our decision to move there in terms of size, but still Jeddah, I believe it's also great hub to maybe to start for some businesses. You don't need to come to Riyadh for all kind of businesses, but Riyadh absolutely will accelerate that, definitely, with a lot of events and these things.
I think a key idea here is that part of this is intentional by the government in Saudi, and there's an economic reason behind it, which is creating density, right? For an ecosystem to grow, we need some kind of density where, you know, I can visit May's office within 5 or 10 minute drive. I find people in a cafe and you know, run into different people and get to know them. I don't have to wait for an annual event to happen to get to see them. Having said that, and as a VC, you know, that's good. And I think Riyadh, the official plan is to get it from 8 million today to 15 million in terms of population. That will be more than enough to create a density. But I'd love to see Jeddah, Dammam, Khobar, other places in Saudi also grow. From my experience in the US, and you know, a lot of your attendees are joining us from the US. One of their strength points is having these different clusters around that. You know, for me, for example, I worked all of those 8 years in the Northwest between Portland and Seattle. I resisted moving to California because I really liked the lifestyle that the Northwest provided. And I was able to find high quality, high tech jobs because they were there, and the talent was there. Not all talent wants to be in Riyadh, for example. So how do we enable that talent to actually also prosper and build? You know, I can understand this temporary phenomenon that is happening in Riyadh to create the density, but at the same time, I'd love to see that doesn't come at the expense of development of other cities. And I think now the new recent programs that you see for Jeddah, for Ula, for other places, Aramco, for example, in the East Province, they're now trying to catch up with what's happening in Riyadh. And there's some decentralization that is happening to each province, where we'll see more competition between them. And I think that's very healthy. And we need that competition, not just within Saudi, but within the whole you know, market of MENA. Because for me as a VC, the whole of MENA is still, relatively speaking, a small market. It's what, 6% of worldwide GDP. So to have scale-ups, to have companies that can reach unicorn status, we really need to open up the whole market. And maybe even that is not enough. We need to see companies exporting outside of MENA as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're coming up on about 10 minutes left, and there's only so much we can cover in this short time. For everyone in the audience, consider this a primer. There's a lot more research to be done, and these three are great places to start. If you have questions in the audience, I saw at least one or two already, but feel free to start dropping them in the chat. I have one more that I want to ask you all, and then I'll turn to audience questions in the time that remains. So we've talked a lot about the reasons to really be excited about the future of the Saudi ecosystem and how it's matured. For each of you, if there's kind of like one roadblock or obstacle that could be removed just with the snap of your fingers today to help the ecosystem continue to grow, what would that be? Maybe Salman, I'll put you on the spot first with that question.
Yeah, great question. So first I want to say there's nothing to remove. I think all the right parts are there. It's growing incredibly well. I think it just needs time. But personally for me, I think one thing that would be great to have is more options for non-dilutive financing with better risk appetites. Like I'm seeing a big trend, especially today, more founders are getting closer to profitability much earlier. And there needs to be a more availability of non-dilutive financing for the startup ecosystem. You know, there's a bit availability for traditional SMEs, but for the startup ecosystem, this would be great. And this would enable faster growth. Yeah, that's in my opinion.
Perfect, thanks. May, one thing that you could change or remove to help accelerate the growth of the ecosystem?
I think Mr. Salman, an extension is right. A lot of good things and initiatives happening faster than we imagine. But I think still maybe we need some, of course, to accelerate some sort of contracting, especially with freelance inside the kingdom, and these things will also accelerate, moving fast and saving some costs for startups in early stage. And I believe there is a lot of good initiative happening. Also, this is the most, I think, things in my mind, which is high priority, that to also like the one that initiative did with the government to give equity sub for the employee. Another thing, I think the private sector, the venture, the family businesses. I think I saw some good big family companies in the kingdom starting doing that, but still ideation phase or something. But it's very important to contribute to that because and try to synergize more with the local entrepreneurs and try to have some venture. I think there is already, and Salman, one of the family, to have these studios within the big businesses to try to accelerate and correct things fast together, not to work in isolation. I believe because we are in one ecosystem, so it's very important to these people to think, to build their ventures and to accelerate and their expertise, and also fund and to what we call it, to make it a mainstream thing together. So private sector, I think also if they involve more, government is doing great of all their initiatives. Maybe also private sector to be practical in that, it would be great to accelerate. And I think there is a lot of them doing, but I mean to build as well, to co-building with the local entrepreneurs.
All right, great. And Waleed, one thing you could remove.
This is fascinating actually for me, because when I first started in VC the last decade, there were barriers to entry. So it was very hard for startups to get into the market. Today, the barriers of entry have been gone or removed, and now we have barriers to scale. That's the new challenge. And Vision 2030, what it did, it actually did two things. It created urgency, something that we really needed. And then it also provided the roadmap. Now, the problem is there are two schools of thought within the policymakers today in Saudi. There are two camps in the Saudi public sector designing policies for the economy and the sector system. One school of thought believes that we need central planning, and we're going to create a champion in each sector by PIF or others. And then there's another camp that says, no, we have to maintain market dynamics. We have to have a vital market and let the market decide how it wants to progress. Now, our role is to support with development of programs and deregulation and reforms and other stuff. It's interesting what's happening today in the interaction between those two camps. It's creating a very interesting dynamic. And with that, a lot of opportunities and also a lot of challenges and threats. So for me, the roadblock would be, let's think really seriously about the split of roles between public and private sectors and see how they can actually complement each other rather than have any overlap or competition between them.
Nice. I really like that. I'm going to try to just list off the questions I'm seeing in the chat from the audience, and then the ones that speak to each of you, feel free to dive in. So there's a question about, what are the top 2 or 3 industries you're excited about that are being built in Saudi? What are some of the regulation changes that have taken place and are taking place to both facilitate the launch of local startups as well as to make it easier for foreign ownership of startups? And then the last question that's come through is around, do you see an entrepreneurial mindset around, specifically amongst the software engineers in Saudi, or has there been kind of tension in their previous experiences in like corporate or government, bringing them in and having them struggle in startups? So maybe to start off, industry is excited about regulation for both local and foreign ownership, and entrepreneurial mindset amongst software engineers. Any of those speak to any of you?
So for an industry that's exciting, even though I'm not a gamer, I think gaming is going to be quite big. There's a lot of government investment in this field. We are a big gaming society here, and I think this is very exciting to see talent being developed in this region and games to come out. I'm very bullish on that.
For us at Sukna, we're sector agnostic, but we do have certain biases. I started my contribution here saying the Saudi economy was really huge. It's 1 trillion, but what I left out is it's unevenly distributed. So for us, we want to focus on startups that fit either 2 profiles. Either you focus on a sector where there's a spike, where Saudi Arabia is punching above its weight. Salman mentioned gaming. I totally agree with that. Saudi gamers are some of the biggest spenders per capita in the world, even bigger than places like Japan. And there's a huge demand there. Or maybe even logistics, energy, healthcare. Now we're going through privatization and other spaces. The other profile that we want to look into is areas where we can leapfrog other ecosystems. So deep tech in terms of AI, bio, and space. For example, in terms of deregulation, now you can do Earth observation startups, which is something you couldn't do until late last year. So either you work on a sectorial spike or a leapfrogging potential startup. That's for us where it gets really exciting.
May, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts, maybe particularly around hiring software engineers and the maybe cultural shock that they might experience coming from a corporate or a public sector job to working in a startup.
Yeah, I think, as I told you, is you need to catch these talent that have this secret sauce, the characteristic that they want, for instance, do something not routinely or bureaucratic somehow, and they can unleash themselves and do something that they love. And later on, maybe they, found a company or something. I think this is, but we saw witness some people, yes, have these different skills. There is lack of process and lack of, especially at a stage like us, there is no clear processes and SOPs like the corporate. So this is something they face challenges with it, and they also sometimes get confused when there is no direction clear direction. Sometimes, you know, in the corporate, there is in each function, there is, you know, a manager and these things, and he have to do this alone, and he have to think and solve problems himself. But I think this is changing, and I can see local talent in software engineers. In terms of hot, of course, vertical, of course, I always promote fintechs, because since we are in this field, still
It's
it's
huge, huge.
yeah, it's important vertical to invest in and have a good reward.
Definitely. We're pretty much at time. I know there's still a few questions, unfortunately, that I couldn't get to in the chat. But I will share, you know, share a recording of this with everyone who signed up. Please do feel free to join the network if you're interested in connecting with people like the panelists today. Waleed, Salman, May, thank you so much. Feel free if there's any closing words that you guys want to share, but just really appreciate your insight and your time with us today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, you know, Saudi is going through a unique time. I encourage everyone to come and visit Saudi. It's very easy today to come and visit us. You know, do historical visits, see different sites, but then also come and check out the startup community, talk with May, talk with Salman and others, and you know, get to see it yourself. It's very easy today to get a visa, so there's no excuse for not, you know, coming in and seeing this in person, because this is a unique experiment. There's so much urgency to diversify out of oil. If we succeed in Saudi, this is going to be big for all of MENA. If we fail, that's going to be, you know, catastrophic for us in Saudi and maybe the whole region as well.
Yeah,
I offer my
add,
services for anyone who's want to come to Saudi. Airbnb, any services, personal or business as well.
I would add, there's, I think, hundreds, if not thousands, of completely foreign-owned founders who have just founded their startups here now in Riyadh. It's incredible. So if you're thinking of opening a startup, come here. There's good resources, great talent. It's a new up-and-coming hub as well.
Yeah, and this panel is the result of that. So that's mean there is a lot of momentum, and you need to catch the momentum. And this is the time, I think.
Yeah.
We are here
now or
to
never.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you all
everyone. I was very happy to be with you today. Assalamu.
Thank you.
Assalamu.
Assalamu.
Assalamu.